I'm Ian Conn. Welcome to the Free Speech Zone. Today I'd like to talk about the FBI encryption Apple situation. Okay. Pretty much everybody has had a crack at this. Everybody has got an opinion. A lot of people don't have the opinion that you think they're going to have. A lot of people just went, whoa, no, Apple should unlock the thing. Other people, in the tech sector have said that, which shocked me. But yeah, to break it down just quickly for people who may or may not be familiar with this, if this is being watched in the year 4006, without going over too much detail, the FBI want to access the phone that is owned by the employer of the San Bernardino shooting, who is now dead, the shooter, not the employer. But the shooter was the user of the phone. So yeah, that's the caveat there. So it was the shooter's phone, but it wasn't actually owned by him. Either way, the owner of the phone is cooperating fully. But the passcode wasn't known by the owner, and so the FBI are trying to get into the phone, find out what other things are in there, and they don't have a way in. It seems like they don't have a legitimate way in. I noticed the NSA has been suspiciously quiet on this. I'm not sure if anyone else has been noticing the language the FBI have been using has been very... everyone who's been sharing with us, all the other government departments who have helped, all those who've responded, not all those we've asked, not all the government departments. So I noticed the NSA just hasn't said shit, which is kind of interesting. Either way, so the FBI want in. They know they can't get in because if they try, it's just the physical passcode lock, the 4 digits. Now, after 10 attempts, 10 failed attempts, the phone will wipe itself. So they've proposed to Apple that they create a special piece of software that will upload itself to the phone, make the phone think it's in some sort of update mode or testing mode or whatever's required, and allow to either bypass the passcode itself, allow the phone to either bypass the passcode itself, or to simply allow them to try every possible combination without after 10 attempts erasing the entire phone. So the standard answers have been, it should be completely private. This is about, free speech, etc., etc. And there is a free speech angle. We'll get to that in a second. And one of the more interesting arguments, I should say, that I've heard lately came from Sam Harris, and he's always got a great angle on things. I enjoy that about Sam. I usually agree with him completely. He thinks about topics incredibly deeply, and that's lacking more and more lately. His opinion is to analogize the phone to a room, and would we allow a person to have a room into which no law enforcement officer could enter? Would we have any sort of moral problem with a physical room in which one could keep documents, or one could keep people, or anything of that nature, or nuclear weapons? Would we allow such a room to be built and maintained? Now, obviously, you can't physically build such a room at this point. There are things called bulldozers and dynamite, and they trump pretty much everything. There's not really much in the way of construction materials that you can't actually get through if you're determined. It's like, bike locks. They just take more time. Don't fool yourself. Buy the best bike lock you can, but, come on. And rooms are much like that. I mean, even if you just come up to a brick building with a hammer, just give it a minute, give it a couple of years, you'll get through it. How do you think prisoners tunnel out of buildings? It's concrete, but just takes time. So there's no such room. However, I agree. I don't think we should, as a society, allow people to build such a room. Just because of the moral and ethical implications. It's obvious once you talk about, can you hold a person in there indefinitely? Well, you don't want a room like that. But then there's a slippery slope that involves, I want a basement recording studio that I can play drums in at 3 a.m. and not annoy my neighbors. I want to build a bunker, essentially. But it'll be for recording and podcasting and all these sorts of fun things. I promise not to torture anyone in there. What's the limit of use? I've got a good security system because all my nice gear's in there. Of course, there's some nice open floor space and a railing on the ceiling. I mount lights and I play drums, yeah, of course. And it's soundproof, of course, yeah. It's a question of use then, because I think a room like that would be a lot of fun. It'd be great fun. I would promise not to torture anyone. I'm not into that. I am into making lots of loud noises at all sorts of times of the day. So yeah, that is a factor. But obviously, that's a slight aside there. But would we allow someone to build a room that you physically couldn't get into, couldn't see into, etc.? In that highly hypothetical situation, I think the answer is no. But I think the analogy is a false one. I think that if you think of a telephone like a room, and you could say that, if you wanted to think of that physics, that way to approach physics as the universe is an information-based system, not an energy and mass-based system. So it's, computation is what the universe is all about, and information processing. So from that point of view, you could say that a telephone might be a locked room, but so could one's brain. And there's that interesting case with the fMRI studies, and I believe it was not studies in the fMRI was used in a case that the defendant had functional knowledge of the crime scene, and that was rightly seen as an absurdity by anyone who understood anything about fMRIs and anyone who understood anything about what guilt is and how memory works and all these sorts of things. Of course, the person's thought about it as much as possible based on descriptions. Now that seems like a ridiculous thing to make a person succumb to a crummy scanning technique, but because their mind should be sacrosanct, their thoughts should be their own. I don't think this is the moral objection to torture, that you shouldn't be able to force someone to tell you things that they don't want to tell you. Obviously, Sam's got an opinion on that as well. And I'm still undecided. I think he's right on that, but so I guess he's at least consistent. But the way I see it is more like it's an aide de memoire. It's a telephone is more like a notebook that you've written for yourself as a little mnemonic device. It's of course there's things about when it was written that you don't record in the notebook itself, but you can find out when they purchased this pen, and that pen is this ink, and it can't have been written before so-and-so. So there is metadata in physical objects, if you like, but it takes a lot of evidence searching and hard analysis work to use it. It's often, only just that reliable. It's only after so-and-so a date. That's not very good, and you can't tell for every pen either. However, a phone is a lot better device for law enforcement to be able to use. Of course it is. It contains factual information about when things occurred, not maybe it occurred then, it's probably after that date, no, Tuesday 2:00, exactly on the money. So there is that factor of it's a great thing for law enforcement to be able to enforce the law that way and be able to get that kind of evidence. It's fantastic. Equally, this is often being framed as a First Amendment debate, but I think it's really more of a Fifth Amendment debate. And I'll tell you why. The gentleman in question would never have written this in a clear text in a physical notebook. He would, if he did, he's self-incriminated, left that evidence around. That's not him having to self-incriminate. But laying aside for the fact that he's dead and the owner of the phone is a different person, those probably are very, very material facts, but we won't go into that right now. This is more about the future of where we're going with all this. In that regard, I certainly agree with Tim Cook. The idea being that if you had written a notebook in perfectly clear text, he would never write that notebook. He would never leave that around. That would be crazy. Why would he do that? That's just perfect evidence. If he had somehow devised himself a shorthand or a language that was absolutely of his own devising, not related to English or any other known language, it was just a completely new shorthand of some description, or a longhand, or who knows, or some binary thing that only he recognized. Could he be compelled to teach someone that language? Well, with torture, he probably could be compelled to, but he certainly couldn't legally be compelled to in any sort of civil situation, or any situation within the United States, one would imagine. Even if he can be compelled to give law enforcement his password to a computer or that sort of thing, it doesn't sound right. It sounds like you're having to teach someone a language, even if teaching them is far easier than you ever reading the language or advising it, even if teaching them the language just simply involves telling them a password or a 4-digit number. So I think it's more like that he would never have incriminated himself. The person would never have left this trail without the understanding that it couldn't be accessed. So I think that's a factor as well. A person wouldn't leave you these juicy nuggets of information. So the law enforcement expectation that if they can get into this phone, and everyone knows this is for the future as well, like the idea that it's just for this one, it's only going to be for this one, don't worry about that. Yeah, come on. Yeah. Yesterday was not the day I was born. I don't think many people in the world listening to this argument are very convinced by that idea either. I think everyone's quite clear that you want to be able to get into these phones. This whole encryption thing, it's a jagged pain in your ass. I mean, I can see why, but don't be silly. I mean, don't think we don't know that you want to keep getting into the phones. The point being, if they believe they've got some sort of beautiful windfall if they can get into these phones, as soon as people know they can get into them, that the FBI can get into the, suspects' phones, then we're back to the situation where they don't leave the information in the phone. They won't call people on a phone that they think can be broken into. They'll use burners and smash the things and throw them in 4 separate rubbish bins, and I don't know how they operate, but I'm sure they've got other means of doing that involve physical destruction rather than, logical destruction of data. So yeah, I think it's more of a Fifth Amendment issue, in that you're asking a person to be incriminated based on prior understandings of how the law works. I mean, in the same way that if you simply want to stay completely silent during your trial, you're allowed to do that. You just don't say anything. You know what I mean? I think that's absolutely fine. You don't, that's, if you feel that's the best way to proceed, then you should be absolutely free to simply not say a word about anything. And I think that changing the rules from underneath a person becomes a case of self-incrimination in a way, because, it also completely negates the idea that there's so much to be gained from doing this from the FBI. Now, the other issue is a First Amendment issue, and it was brought up by Jeremy on the This Is Only a Tested podcast. I sort of just heard this morning. Now, he brought up a couple of good ideas. That code is speech. I like that idea. It's obvious when you think about it. Obviously, it would be. Why wouldn't code be speech? It's an expression of ideas, and it's an expression of ideas that just whether or not it outputs exactly what was input, or if it outputs some combination of what was input. You know what I mean? It's a very interesting idea. So if code is speech, and the other thing that I was unaware of that he brought up was that a person can't be compelled to speak either. That's an aspect of US free speech law that I was unaware of, and I haven't checked it, so I'm just rolling on Jeremy's say-so. But if you can't be compelled to speak, and code is speech, then how on earth can Apple be compelled to write code it doesn't want to write? And that's the sort of thing I never quite understood either. It's like, how can you force me to do my job for the government if I don't want to do it? I surely should. I mean, if Apple's really serious, everyone should just resign. Like, literally, every software engineer in the company who's capable of doing it, just resign. And just stop doing that whole software development thing for a few weeks. The world won't stop, Apple. If iTunes doesn't get a fucking update this week, you know what happens? Everyone just is cool with that, and you won't get any more complaint letters about this shocking and shitty new nonsense you've added to iTunes. What will happen if you don't update anything for a whole couple of weeks? Nothing. It's like when the US government shut down. Nothing happened. I mean, the idea that they shut down the parks, the national parks and whatnot, it was bloody absurd. I mean, just open the things. I'm not sure. It's probably a liability thing or some sort of got to open gates and close gates or something. I don't know why they just basically closed them, but they did. They closed them, and that was on them, I guess, or however they do that. But otherwise, I mean, people chastise governments for not passing many bills is the big thing you hear in America. They've only passed this many bills in this many. Great. Call me a conservative in this angle if you like. But I think we've probably got enough new rules. I mean, we've had rules. What happened to the rules of keep your word and don't harm anybody? That should be the law. There's your law, right? The specifics, obviously, we have common law. But in terms of parliamentary law, don't harm anyone and keep your word. A pretty good starts and covers a lot of ground. Now, obviously you need some more than that to start doing things like taxation and armies and, nation building and kings and queens and all the rest of the crap that needs paperwork in order to succeed. But yeah, I mean, the bulk of the law should realistically, in my humble opinion, be don't hurt anyone. Keep your word in business deals and stuff. Do what you said you're doing contracts, and just don't fuck with anyone or cause anyone any harm, financial, physical, and then have graded scales as to how much harm was caused or how much, obviously that doesn't take any sort of risk into account, but you could consider risk in that, I suppose. But yeah. Anyway. So yeah, they have they're being compelled to speak, which is obviously then a First Amendment issue. So I'd like to hear some more about that from people who know a lot more about US constitutional law than I do. If any of you do, hit us up in the Twitter, hit us up in the Facebook, all that sort of stuff. Happy to hear from you. Hit us up in the comments down below. But yeah, so I think that's a very interesting point. And I want to reiterate that idea that I think this is very much like being forced to teach someone a language that they don't understand in order for them to read your diary, even if they're the government. Having to teach someone a language, having to do something skilled in any way at the point of a gun, I don't like that. I just don't like it. I mean, we're really going to have a situation where software developers are forced to develop software by the courts? It feels weird. It feels like people being forced to race sewing machines by Joseph Stalin or something. It feels like such an odd thing to have to say. Being forced to develop software. Never thought I'd have to say that. But yeah, I don't know. And it brings back a wonderful point. So much of how we understand the world is based on analogy. And attempting to reason with analogy is often so fraught with trouble. You don't think of protons as protons. Most people don't. A proton is a little ball, right? A little circle ball sits next to a slightly different colored ball. It sits there with a cloud of smaller balls orbiting around it like planets around a big clustery carbuncly star. Because it's not what they are. I don't have a vision of what a proton is, but I certainly do have a vision of what a proton is, but I can be almost assured it's not accurate. I can be fairly certain that my, to use Richard Dawkins' term, middle world perception can't even perceive or conceive of what a proton truly is. Certainly not in any meaningful way. Equally, that analogy just isn't accurate. It's not helpful, and we don't really, we show it to kids still, it seems. I'm not sure why. It's the same way we do the solar system out of scale, because it's just incomprehensibly unprintable if it were to scale, I suppose. But the limits to our limits on our metaphors of understanding. We leverage these metaphors to gain better understanding of the universe. we do our very best, and it's like wave-particle duality. I mean, what the hell are we even talking about? It's a wave and it's a particle. It's neither. It's both of those things. It's something different to either of those things. And that's okay. But we need to always keep in mind that it's something different to both of those things. The idea that we can just go, well, yeah, it's a wave now, don't worry about it. Oh, it's a particle now, don't worry about it. That helps you with the maths and helps you with figuring out the engineering, no doubt. But it doesn't really help you understand in any truly meaningful way, in my opinion. Equally, trying to think of a phone as a locked room, not terribly helpful. It's not a physical object. If it was the location of a nuke in the phone, well, I know, these are very hard questions, but it's not a locked room. If it was the key to a locked room, well, I guess it is a locked room, isn't it? I don't know. Maybe Sam's right. But my main point today certainly is that our understanding rests on an underpinning of a series of metaphors that we don't always have control over when we're going to use those metaphors from this point onwards as axiomatic. We come to a point with certain metaphors where we go, yep, I am absolutely happy with this Field's theory of how forces propagate. Yep, that's a thing. Now, if tomorrow someone came out with a much better way to look at this, and it'd have to be much better and rather revolutionary, then sure. A lot of people can learn the new model and whatnot, but it's often a translation from your old model, it seems to me. We don't have much in the way of freedom to change our axioms. Our axia? Once we learn new things, we integrate them in there and we manage to make them work. But very often we've still got these biases that we bring to the table based on our experiences in Middle World, you know? So a person who's dealing with electrons can't just go, oh, well, don't worry about it. They use the best approach that fits for any given situation, no doubt. But they always keep in mind that it is not a particle, as one would understand it. It's not a billiard ball, and it is not a wave. It's not a water wave. It's not. It doesn't have any of these properties we often associate with the waves we see. It acts as one in various ways, but not directly. It's not actually a wave in the way we conceive of waves either, because it has physicality, momentum. Now, how can that be? Yeah. So, the physicist working with these problems always strives, I would imagine, to keep in mind that at no point should you ever forget that these are just models and this is not exactly what an electron is. An electron is actually something very different, and it needs to be thought of differently. Same way a phone is not a room, it's not a notebook, and it needs to be thought of differently. Sadly, the way we think of it may come down to how Congress acts in the next not too distant future. And if not, if Congress doesn't act, and I believe I saw the other day that they're already planning to, if they don't have much in the way of traction on the issue, Congress is going to act. So Apple will either be in the Supreme Court minus Scalia, which is an interesting situation, whoever gets temporarily appointed there, or, and that will take time obviously, or Congress will jump in, legislate on the situation, and some group will probably take them to the Supreme Court as well. We're not going to see the end of this little fight for a long time. One of the main problems is now it'll be left to judges who have humanities degrees most of the time. I mean, that's not always the case, but my very few experiences in courtrooms, never as the defendant, I might add, my very few experiences in courtrooms have shown me judges don't understand what happens. They certainly don't understand technology and mobile phones. They may have better advisors now, but so often they just seem to not get what's going on in the world or around them, or how those systems work. And unfortunately, we have to rely on them to be able to be educated about a new topic for their new trial and have a good breadth of knowledge so as they can do that. They therefore can't have a depth of knowledge about anything except legal precedent so much of the time, and jurisprudence, which is sad. It'd be nice if we had some people who've worked in certain areas or got degrees in certain things could decide cases where more technical knowledge was required. Maybe there is some provision for that at the moment. Don't know. I hope so, but I don't think there is. And yeah, so in the situation where you've got people who don't themselves use email yet, deciding on what happens in these sorts of cases, they will use bedrock examples like, and this is, the lawyers will do it for them. This is kind of the lawyer's job, is to bring this lay person, is to speak to experts, translate down to lay and legal, and bring these technical concepts in legalese to these other person who also speaks the legal jargon but doesn't have any idea that it's not actually a blinking light. It's a series of blinking lights at once through an optical fiber, or, you know what I mean? And analogies break down. So unfortunately, this is going to once again be decided by people using very simple analogies, axiomatic understandings of rather complex ideas because they've just been with them for so long. These are misconceptions that they've had since childhood about how things work that they carry with them. No doubt. We all have those, I'm sure, but, I'm not sure if... I'm sure I have them about the law, because I've never really studied the law. I've done bits and pieces of bush lawyering, but I've never studied the law. Equally, I've done a lot of work in audio-visual and IT. I've done a lot of work in music making and music itself and the music biz, if you like. And I couldn't imagine a judge having anything like an understanding of what I do, and nor should they, I suppose. But I mean, I have a much better understanding of how physical objects work than a judge does. They have an average judge, I would say. I'm certainly not going to speak for Mr. Technical over there, or we're speaking in broad strokes today about all of this, no doubt. But yeah, it does make me worry when ideas like this are going to be decided by people who don't use email, people who think that using BlackBerry, there's a fly in here, people who think that using a BlackBerry is the latest and greatest, and yeah, it's really a worry. I don't know. We're set to see a regime change anyway, in terms of President Trump. I don't know. It was going to be a joke, wasn't it? Didn't Lisa in The Simpsons, when she was president, inherit the budget deficit from President Trump? Isn't that what happened? Because all this foreshadowing seems a little bit scripted, doesn't it? The Biff Tannen thing, the meme that's been going around just lately about how Biff Tannen was just warming us up for Donald Trump, the property mogul, gambler, billionaire with the hair. Yeah, it's a bit of a worry. The conspiracy theorists among us may get a little bit all choked up over that little thing. But it's alright. It's not a conspiracy. It's just a nasty coincidence. Trump's an interesting breath of fresh air, as long as he doesn't do half of what he says he's going to do, which makes him more the politician than he would ever like to admit. So he probably will do most of what he wants to do and says he's going to do, which is half terrifying and half not so bad. Not everybody's talking about the idea that he was recently praising the NHS. He doesn't mind Obamacare terribly much. He dislikes the implementation, but I could have a lot to say about the damn implementation. The implementation is absurd, tying it to people's workplaces and all the ridiculous nonsense that entails now in the Supreme Court about, do I have to pay for someone else's contraception when I think it's, God doesn't want it, capital G. It's just like, my God, just don't link it to the workplace. Just don't. That was just a really shitty Nixon-era decision that's still haunting America. But yeah, so he supports the NHS. He's not too bad about Obamacare. The wall thing's a worry. The China thing's a worry. The what's the other worry? There's another big worry. I don't know. Just the way he speaks to people. He's not a statesman. He's not a diplomat. I like that he's not part of the institution of democracy in America, because that's a heck of a shitty institution right now. Just the fundraising. I think everyone's starting to be very sick of it, hence the, feeling the burn and the Donald Trump situation. Everyone knows that you guys spend 90% of your time just raising money for yourselves to get re-elected next time, so you can spend 90% of your time raising money so you can get re-elected. Because this ain't a bad gig, this fundraising in a nice marbly bloody mahogany office. That's not bad, so I think everyone in America is getting a little bit more aware that these people aren't really helping, and these career politicians aren't really your friend, so that's why I think Bernie's been so successful. But the high tax rate thing's going to kill him, even if it comes down to him and Trump. As much as I understand what he's saying, like, it's like 2 million or 5 million. Once you earn over that, it's 90%. He hasn't ruled out 90% highest marginal rates on tax. Now, why the fuck not? Who needs more than 5 million a year? You can make him more than 5 million a year. You need to shut the fuck up. You need to shut the fuck up. $5 million a year. That's $100,000 a week. Shut up. You need to shut up. $100,000 a week. I never found a pay anything after this, and I pay 90% tax. There's no point in working anymore. Good. Work 30 hours a week and make your $5 million. Free the fucking job up for someone else. You job hog. The fuck are you doing? I have no sympathy for this whatsoever. I think if you can make $5 million a year, and if you can do it in 25, 30 hours a week, because if you can make, $10 million a year in 50 hours a week, then surely scaling down shouldn't be too much of a problem for you. Then make your 5 mil, work 25 hours a week, put your fucking feet up, work till 1 o'clock in the day, put your feet up and shut the fuck up. I don't understand the problem. How are you not able to put enough aside at $5 mil a year? How many fucking Maseratis do you want? I live in quite a rich suburb here. We live in a, rather shitty house on a really nice street, and it's a great thing. People talk about that, and I tell you, it's everything it's cracked up to be. And yeah, you see some of the cars people have around here are wonderful, but you realize that's their daily driver. They've got a Maserati just in the driveway, and then a massive garage. And you go, what are you driving, bro? What's your weekend car, friend? But that's fine. I mean, I don't begrudge a person a Maserati. I love a fucking Maserati. I wouldn't buy a Maserati if I was buying cars. Fuck that. Buy a Shelby Cobra or something. Get one of those mad ones made. Get a fucking tin top Cobra. Yes. That's what you get. You get an electric one too to shut up the greenies, and you just drive the V8 one around and just tell them it's an electric. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Nah. I reckon you could get some sort of a killer ass fucking electric Shelby Cobra situation. Imagine a Tesla, like one of those mad quick Teslas, on a Shelby Cobra body. Now I've got you thinking. Now I've got me thinking. That's what I'd fucking have if I could have any car in the world. Yes. Anyway, yeah. So I think that even if Trump, and it is Trump and Sanders in the election, they're the nominees, I think we've got a really serious problem, because at this point, Trump hasn't really confronted Sanders head on. I mean, they've had debates and bits and pieces and stoushes, but my understanding is there hasn't been much in the way of negative publicity, big scare campaigns. This 90% tax thing, he'll take him to town on that. He'll have to take a position, have to break some promises later on. That's a real problem. And Hillary, oh God, I hope she doesn't get in. Just from the lies and the institutionalized politics and the Clintons. It's a fucking dynasty. We don't need that shit. There was already Bushes. I mean, thank fuck Jeb didn't get in. It'd be like Joe Bluth getting in. But I don't know. Hopefully, sanity prevails, and They all decide not to run for president, and we get someone reasonable, just jumps in at the last minute. But honestly, the one with the chance to win is the sociopath who, with that glint of shark in her eye. I won't mention any names, but you know the lady I'm talking about. Yeah, I don't know. The Benghazi thing, the email server thing, these are anyone else would have gone to jail over sharing classified documents or mishandling classified documents. And she's well aware that there is a difference between, I didn't know. It doesn't matter if you didn't know with classified documents. If you have security clearance, you should well be on the lookout for things that could be classified or should be classified. And if you see such a thing and it doesn't have a classified stamp on it, you don't tell people. You don't just let that be out there. You don't... Anyway, I don't know. She's got a long record of just fucking up and covering her tracks. She wants in. She wants the prize. She's wanted the prize since the last one as well. Let's never forget she did this once before against Obama. Got her ass wiped, you know. And that wasn't good for her. But she's back, you know, in a power suit shaped piece of vengeance. I don't know, I just hope she doesn't get in. But then Trump with the nuclear codes building the wall. Oh my god. Oh my god. As I say, honestly the best outcome I think would be if Trump got in and just broke half of his promises and was a one-termer, but did some of the things he wanted to do, and then just came up with some good bullshit excuses as to why he couldn't do most of the rest of them. So become the politician he's attempting to show everyone he's not. But that's probably the best outcome, I think. A benign Donald Trump, you know, an emasculated Donald Trump, just like that painting that was going around. That's probably the best we can do. And still, this is the real trouble. I mean, I'm in Australia, so I don't get a say. I just get to sit here on the sidelines and really not get a say at all. It sucks terribly because it matters for world politics. I mean, it's the sort of thing that obviously you can't let everyone vote for the president of the USA. The fucking Ayatollah will get in, you know. But it affects everybody. It really does. The whole China mashup clip of Donald Trump is a real worry, you know, like it doesn't surprise me either that his caps or ties or whatever the fuck are made in China. I know that's being used as a trap. And I get it, it's an easy trap to use, but it's a bit of a fool's errand. He's a successful businessman, and I know that's to be debated. He's been bankrupt how many fucking times, but he's playing by the rules of a successful businessman in a sense. You know what I mean? That whole, yeah, of course he goes for the place where it's cheaper. Of course you do. That proves his point. That doesn't make him a hypocrite. There should be rules in place that make it less cheap to have these things made in China than there are to make them in America. They're called tariffs. They were tried out once. They were pretty good. Kept most of the freaking countries in work, and I'm not sure what happened. Obviously, we're meeting in the middle in terms of global incomes, which means stagnation in the West, and we're seeing that, and massive growth in the East, in the developing world. I've always campaigned for a global minimum wage, but I didn't expect my one to be fucked with. You know, like, I've been getting paid the same measly bullshit since about 2001. My wage literally hasn't... I've gone through 2 careers, or 3 careers if you like. I've gone through so many different training courses. I've increased my skills, my knowledge base on so many levels, but still, here we are, you know? How long we got? Yeah, we got enough time. Yeah, so wages don't go up, but in Australia, costs of living just keep going up. So our real wages are going down all of the time. And a global, you know, we should all be citizens. I mean, why does a bag of rice cost more somewhere than somewhere else? Because of the price of labor. Well, why does the price of labor cost more here? Well, because we need it, because the price of rice is so fucking high. It's circular. It's absurd. there are global consumer goods like tellies from China and computers and phones and whatnot, which, yes, they should be rare. You shouldn't see 52-inch televisions just chucked out on the street. That's crazy. Around here you do. You pick up some great bargains around these parts. Computers and TVs and shit just on the street because someone got another one. They just couldn't be bothered chucking it on Gumtree, and they don't want to probably interact with the type of person you meet on Gumtree when you're looking for a used computer. I've been there. Most of my computers are used recently, and it's a fucking experience. It's an adventure, man. I carried a fucking 5-unit Dell server home from Port Melbourne on the bus. I carried it about 600-700 meters. The thing must weigh 35 kilos. It's just a giant metal box with 2 big fucking Xeons in it. Anyway. The point being that, these things should be rare and difficult to find. And you should only have, the means for a couple here and there. I like that things are cheap, but a chair should be a chair that lasts a long time, and it should be difficult to, of course someone should be paid properly to make you a chair, and you should never have to worry about that chair problem again. You've got chairs. They're fixed. Got it. I don't know. Hopefully we'll return to something like that, but consumerism drives so much of the world's economy. It's hard to imagine how we'll do it. Yeah. On that happy note, signing off. This is the Free Speech Zone. I'm Ian Conn. Have a top day.